Hi everyone, I'm Ajay and I'm studying the Bachelor of Business here at Unitec. And I'm really glad that I've got this chance to be here and I'm sure I can learn quite a bit. And although I don't have the expertise as everyone here, I'd just like to ask a few questions so I can understand better what the issues are. And I've only been in New Zealand for the last 3.5 years, but I've tried to pick up as much as I can. The first one would be, from what I read after the task force as well, the talk was of comparisons of GDP. So question to the panel would be, is GDP the right measure, is what we should be looking at with Australia? And is it wise, do we need to work harder or do we need to work smarter? And with what the point that was made earlier with New Zealanders working longest hours in the OECD as well. And the second question would be, what does it take to increase productivity as well? And this is with investments in businesses as well, and funding for entrepreneurs or even students and young people who've got good ideas and what they'd like to see. What are the systems in place for us to be able to do that? And what are the new skills that's required for young people in the next 15 or 20 years? Because we don't know what jobs we will be working with in 15 years' time. They don't even exist as yet. And do we have the infrastructure to provide those jobs for the young people? And we don't know what the demands are too. So again, with the point that was raised earlier as well, with not enough spending on research and development. So I'd just like to hear more on the panel expanding more on that point. And what me and Sven tried to do was look at New Zealand as we've only been here for very few months or few years, but we just thought of how much of what we knew of New Zealand when we were back home in our countries, and what the advantages New Zealand has in the market and what the image of New Zealand is. And the first one is definitely the image in the world, and it's not just limited to tourism, but it's the amount of soft power, the goodwill that the country has, and the images that that come into your mind when you think of New Zealand as a country. So that's something that can be leveraged, as well as the sense of community that I've experienced being in this country. So that's, I think, a very good positive as well. And I think Kiwis are great improvisers, and just with the resources that's here. And I really like the discussions that happens, and of course the natural capital with the resources that's there, the potential for using renewable energy in this country. And I think New Zealand is a better place than most countries in the world for this in the future, next 15 or 20 years or even further than that. And Sven has some.
So what we tried to do next was we tried to get a sense of what we could do or what New Zealand could do to increase productivity and what's internationally known about the problems within New Zealand. So those 4 points are coming from one OECD survey saying the 4 issues New Zealand should address at the moment would be reassess governmental ownership, looking at transportation, electricity. A lot of things are owned by the government and they're not managed competitive. So a lot of things just flowing along instead of really using the resources you're having in this country and create some productivity. The infrastructure projects need to be undertaken. Looking at Auckland, is anyone here who is not complaining about public service? No one? Well, there were issues in the past. We've been talking to quite a few people who said New Zealand had the opportunity in the past to do a lot for the infrastructure and hasn't done it. And people are talking a lot about it, but in the last 2 years, I haven't seen any improvements within the infrastructure, saying public transport, internet connection, anything in Auckland. Surely the CDB has better internet now, but the rest of Auckland is still lagging behind, not to talk about the rest of New Zealand in total. One of the next points was create a conducive environment for businesses. The problem with businesses coming to New Zealand is, well, they're far away from their home markets, and what they need is to be connected with other markets to export stuff. And that's a bit of an issue, saying internet connection or transportation system within New Zealand. And the last point was spending on social development. Instead of only looking at increasing productivity, there are a couple of problems coming up in New Zealand, facing New Zealand, and one of the main issues is healthcare. The OECD survey says they estimate the cost for healthcare is going to double within the next 10 years. And that's going to raise like a big hole into the budget. And our next two slides, the first one concentrates on governmental policies, and the second one is going to be about business policies. Governmental policies about investments are, what's the best way to express this? I had someone telling me like there are two options. It's either the cheapest way or the best way. And New Zealand government at the moment, most of the time, are looking at the cheapest way instead of the best way. There are issues like about buildings, governmental buildings at the moment. They are produced the cheapest way. New Zealand, there's opportunity of the governments building buildings with like energy efficiency standards within the world and creating a market. And that market could be picked up by the public sector and the private sector afterwards and actually increase. Governmental policies with skills. There's a cap on how many students every university can have at the moment. What Australia did was they set a goal of having, I think it's 40% of all people between 20 and 35 having at least a bachelor's degree by 2025. And what New Zealand is doing, they're cutting the amount of students. So there's a bit of an issue there. The same is with skills. New Zealand is funding a lot of research at the moment, but looking at work-based learning, there's a big lack. So you've got like a lot of people thinking about a lot of good, great ideas about a lot of opportunities you're having, but you've got no one who can actually do it. Yeah. So that's a big issue. Infrastructure, I've been talking about that just now, and research and development. It's an issue for public and private sector at the moment, but the public sector is spending money on research and development, but definitely not enough to increase GDP, to create a market of further growth. And the next slide will be about business and what businesses can do and how they're going to compete in 2025. One of the OECD surveys said that New Zealand is one of the lowest markets, or like the company spending the lowest amount on R&D. And to get an idea about R&D, it's measured as a percentage of GDP. So you've already got a lower GDP than most other countries, and then you've got, on top of that, you've got a lower measurement of, like, a lower spending on R&D. So instead of, like, saying European countries spending billions on money on R&D, New Zealand has, like, a couple of millions. And then businesses saying they want to pick up with other markets, they want to, like, increase their volumes, want to increase capabilities. But like, how do you want to achieve it? And that's one of the big issues that has to be addressed. And the other thing that's a bit missing here is a dynamic learning environment. People are learning, having a degree, go in business, have a bit of money to live with, and then what? They just continue to flow in a stream. It's not like they don't really use their skills and their knowledge to like further create a big business. They stop at a certain level where they have like a good standard of living, and that's it. And our last and big issue is about sustainability. There have been a lot of research being done. People know surveys saying in about 20 to 25 years, there probably won't be any oil left, or we can't afford it anymore. And now we're talking about increasing productivity, working on the same systems we had in place for the last 50 years, with the knowledge that in 20 years it's over. In 20 years, we might pick up with Australia. New Zealand has the opportunity. And then there's no more oil, no more business, and then we have the same problems again. So that's our last big issue that we want to talk about tonight.
That's very good. Well, thank you very much indeed. That's a very good array of issues, and you've set some very challenging ones there, and I'm glad you got the resources one on the table. That's fantastic. So thank you very much indeed to the two of you.